Ethnic enclaves formed by extended families of migrant workers can be hotbeds for the spread of extremist ideologies, former Russian president and the deputy chair of the country's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, believes. Medvedev made the remarks during a meeting to address migration and potential improvements to the country's legislation in this field. Extended families brought in by migrant workers create various issues in Russia, he said. The prolonged stay of migrant workers' family members puts a very serious strain on the social sphere of our country, and in some cases it causes tensions between ethnic groups, Medvedev stated. Some of the migrants and their family members do not work or study anywhere and do not want to comply with the norms of Russian legislation, the former president observed. Ethnic enclaves that emerge can become breeding grounds for extremism, he warned. More than 40% of some 200,000 migrant children currently studying in Russia demonstrate insufficient knowledge of the Russian language, Medvedev stated. Earlier this month, Russia introduced new rules requiring the children of migrants to undergo mandatory Russian language tests. The system is expected to be implemented next spring, with those who fail being barred from attending regular schools. Over the past few months, Russia has tightened migration laws with multiple new initiatives adopted or considered by the country's parliament. Medvedev has been among the most vocal proponents of such changes, arguing that migrants who do not work or study in the country should ultimately leave. In September, the ex-president suggested that seasonal migrant workers should be prohibited from bringing in their families. I am a proponent of this, as applied to schools, migrant families and enclaves. Of course, we won't be able to overcome every tendency there, but what can be done? If a person comes to us for seasonal work, why the hell does he drag his family along with him? Medvedev said at the time. Russia has sent many immigrants who recently received citizenship to join the military fighting in Ukraine. Military service is mandatory in Russia for all men aged 18 to 27. Although Russia has vastly widened the scope of who it seeks to see in the military after huge losses suffered in its war against Ukraine, Russia has sought to replenish its military ranks through other means, including the recruitment of migrants and new Russian citizens, likely hoping to avoid changing the rules on conscript deployment or a repeat of the unpopular mobilization drive in the fall of 2022. The fall of Syrian ruler Bashar al-Assad and Russia's indifference to it shows that for Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, it is more important to inflict a decisive defeat on Ukraine, according to an article in the American magazine Foreign Affairs. The publication analyzed the consequences of the fall of the Assad regime for Russia and came to the conclusion that Putin is ready to sacrifice everything, including the country's previous successes in the Middle East, for the sake of a complete victory in the war in Ukraine. It is noted that Moscow successfully helped Assad restore military and political control over most of Syria, but was unable to deal a decisive blow to the resistance in the long term. Russia also failed to promote economic development in Syria. After all, it is claimed, the Russians always looked at the Syrian expedition with caution and indifference, since the idea of sending soldiers to a distant Muslim country evoked memories of the Soviet war in Afghanistan. But now, with the collapse of the Assad regime, Putin can focus on the war in Ukraine, even though Russia's allies, the exporter of stability and regime security, still expected more from him than just saving the life and freedom of the Syrian dictator. At the same time, Putin's decision to prioritize Ukraine, the newspaper notes, should not be confused with a complete renunciation of Russian ambitions beyond its immediate neighborhood. Rather, the loss of Syria has simply raised the stakes of the war in Ukraine. In Putin's scheme, Ukraine has become a tipping point in the global struggle between Western elites and a new Russian-led order. When Ukraine falls, Russia hopes to seize Georgia and any other territory it desires and resell itself as a powerful patron to countries around the world, the newspaper suggests. To this day, Russia continues to occupy 20% of Georgia's territory and impose its will on the people there, including by claiming the transfer of strategically important lands in Abkhazia to Russia and taking steps to establish a permanent naval base in Ochamchiri. Experts say that all Russian assault groups may soon switch to ziguli. Two such Soviet subcompacts were recently spotted in Luhansk region. The enemy tried to break through to the Ukrainian armed forces positions in two such vehicles, but became easy prey for drones, Forbes reports. "We work clearly, methodically and mercilessly," said the Ukrainian Armed Forces unit that destroyed at least one of these vehicles along with its crew. Last week in the Pokrovsk area, the enemy attacked the Ukrainian Armed Forces positions with 7 vehicles and trucks. The USSR flag could be seen on one of the vehicles. The public officer then wrote that all enemy vehicles were destroyed and the Ukrainian Armed Forces paid special attention to the car with the USSR flag. OSINT analyst Tatarigami stated that the enemy often attacks Ukrainian positions on cars and motorcycles. In this way, he simply probes weak spots in order to later send assault units to that area. During the 34 months of the war in Ukraine, the enemy has lost up to 15,000 armored vehicles. The Russian defense industry cannot produce armored vehicles in the quantities that Putin's army suffers daily on the battlefield in Ukraine. Back in the fall, the Z Public, 2 majors, wrote that the command of the Russian armed forces began to assemble vehicles that in the future, in case of emergency, would have to be used to engage in combat with the Ukrainian armed forces. Experts say that with the arrival of December, this very critical moment has arrived for the occupiers in the Pokrovsk direction. The Ukrainian Center for Defense Strategy stated that by March 2025, Putin plans to take full control of Donbass. However, the enemy will have to attack the Ukrainian armed forces positions more and more often in old Soviet ziguli cars. Commander of Ukraine's National Guard, Oleksandr Pivnenko, said recently that Russians attempted to attack the defense forces positions using an old passenger ziguli car and golf cart. However, aerial reconnaissance operators from the Spartan Brigade detected this enemy maneuver. Afterward, soldiers from the National Guard's anti-tank guided missile company, artillerymen and FPV drone operators joined the effort. The ziguli car and the golf cart, which the occupiers tried to use for the assault, were reduced to ashes and the infantry was eliminated, the commander of Ukraine's National Guard stated.